decarbonisation, the mobility of the future. Panel discussion supported by Shell Hungary. Participants: Tamás, Csabai, Shell Hungary ZRT Head of Fleet Solutions. András, Salgó, BMW Group Hungary Corporate Communications Manager. Dávid, Reményik, BK Logistics Head of Corporate Governance. Moderator, Ferenc, Lajkó. DigiLog Consulting Managing Director, Board Member of the Hungarian Association of Executives. Award winner of the Manager of the Year Award of the Hungarian Association of Executives. Let me extend a warm welcome to everyone at this afternoon session, and I hope we are going to be skillful enough to maintain your attention. And then the purpose is decarbonisation and the future of mobility. So this is the title of this panel discussion as well. The previous panel discussion had a similar title as well, and we have to explain why it's so important to deal with mobility so much. We've actually have been able to read quite many papers about greenhouse gas emissions. Last week, the Environment Agent's 2021 paper was something that I was reading, and then they were discussing in this paper that road transport represents about 20% of the greenhouse gas emissions. About 90% of that emissions is CO2. Since 1990, greenhouse gases have been a hot topic, and global actions have been taken to reduce it. And nevertheless, between 1990 and year 2008, road transport that we are talking about has increased its emissions by 28%. So this is a bad result. Even worse than taking 2 steps forward and then 1 backwards. And then there's another shocking result in this paper from 2021. They said that if everything remains as in terms of regulations as it was in 2021, then road transport will add 30% more to overall greenhouse gas emissions. So this paper gives us the vision that even with extra regulations, it will be very difficult to achieve a level of emissions by 2030 that is equal to the level of emissions observed in 1990. So this is why we are still working towards this topic during this panel discussion, and we still need to talk about what we can and what we have to do for mobility. András from BMW represents the cars, personal vehicles, and Dávid, Reményik will represent trucks. And then Tamás, Csabai from Shell, well, it's difficult to categorize him, but mobile service provider is the best phrase to use for his sector, because Shell does not only deal with fuel and V-power, but also they started to embark on some different activities. But I am ahead of myself, so now that as I am talking about the threats of global warming and climate. So my question, therefore, is what decarbonization actions you think you can take? I hope that it's not going to be up to BMW to achieve this goal, because from 2009 up until late 2020, 50% reduction has been achieved in the CO2 emissions and or greenhouse gas emissions, and the plan is that by the year 2030, over the whole cycle of a car, starting from procuring the materials for production of a car through to the end, we want to achieve a 30% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. The E3 BMW car was actually started to be produced in 2019, and then by 2013 or the end of 2023, we are going to produce so many different types of electric cars. So it means that we can offer electric cars as alternative solutions to their current cars. So it doesn't mean that BMW is leaving the sector of normal fueled cars. So actually, we think that the development of the world actually goes ahead without having equal steps taken. Some countries, for instance Norway, they can actually switch to e-cars and e-mobility nearly overnight. However, there are some other countries that cannot do that, so we want to equally serve all countries. Therefore, in our forecast, we say that about 50% of our total sales will be represented by e-cars by the year 2030. However, Mini, which is one of the brands we are talking about, will be electric car from year 2030 onwards. So it will be a dedicated electric car because it's a mini one for cities. And the Rolls-Royce is another example. This is a luxury car, and then by the year 2030, Rolls-Royce will be fully electric driven. Well, it sounds good. How about in trucks? Well, in our sector of the total CO2 emissions of the EU, trucks represent 5%. So it's about 7 times Hungary's emissions over a year, which is a huge amount of gases, fuel emitted. So Hungary is taking steps in order to achieve these decarbonisation targets. By year 2030, what we expect is that number of trucks newly commissioned will increase by 50%. So it's the number of trucks will increase. Not only the fleet, the existing fleet will be replaced, but additional trucks will be added to the current fleet, and it doesn't matter what type of trucks will be these trucks and whether they are going to be environmentally friendly. Well, we can see a decarbonization taking place in our sector, like in the sector of trucks, even if it's not at the pace that has already been achieved in the manufacturing of cars. You probably have already heard about electrically driven trucks, but out of curiosity, can you raise your hands if you have already seen a truck with a plate number of green background, which shows that this is an electric truck? Of course, very few of you have raised your hands, so it means that I could only see once such type of truck, even if I am this sector. But nevertheless, we could see some good examples, like for instance, railway transport is having its renaissance. So the European Union is working towards a railway transport because it is electrically driven. And city logistics is another area with good examples, because you have these electric driven vans that are increasing in number. And trucks also are required to have Euro 6 engines built in them. Of course, it has to do with consumption and also the fact that this kind of engine has much lower CO2 emissions and other greenhouse gas emissions. So, of course, it's worth to mention that now with the Russian-Ukraine conflict, the high fuel prices actually give a boost to market players to change to better trucks that actually have a better consumption of fuel, and also the tire pressure, if set more correctly, can achieve you 40% consumption improvement of fuel, just if you really do a good setting of your tires and wheels in your trucks. So if I understand you correctly, then in terms of trucks, we are lagging behind cars. Before these technologies are used more increasingly, even during that period, we have the options of railway transport or the option of reducing our fuel consumption. So, well, how a mobility service provider can support these targets? Because if you have an electric-driven truck or a hydrogen-driven truck, it's not enough. You have to supply it with energy. Yes, for Shell, it's quite a challenge. How to create a structure that can actually support this decarbonization as an ambition. As István mentioned in his keynote speech, hydrogen could be an alternative fuel which is worthwhile to analyze by Shell as well, because a major expansion could be carried out by Shell as well in hydrogen fuel cars. However, there's another aspect of it, that is profitability, and whether chicken or hen is first is again something that we have to analyze, and regulatory authorities and EU subsidies are something that will give us input into how to develop these alternative filling stations. Well, the bio-LNG products are there as well that could serve as fuels for trucks, but there we can see that there's a market for such fuels, and then we are making plans to do such investments in this region, Central Eastern Hungary, Eastern Europe, and also in wider Europe as well. But it's very important for us to see, and our partners to see, how they look ahead into the future. Shell has mentioned this net zero emissions company by year 2050. It's very important for us to see on what path we can achieve that. And if we zoom into the Shell Hungary operations, then I can say that we have a specific action plan that gives us some ideas about what to do and what to achieve even by 2015. So here in Shell Hungary, the target is 20% low emission fuel or electric filling is something that we should sell. So our total portfolio, 20% should come from these alternative fuels, and then of course, we want to operate all these filling stations from renewable energies, but also we want to do further developments in fossil fuel as well. So the V-Power is going to be further developed as well, but we also want to ensure that those cars who are still fueled by fossil fuels can operate more efficiently. I think that during the transitory period, we also have some opportunities to help decarbonization. We have a so-called nature-based solution that has a possibility to compensate retroactively our carbon footprint or some other company's carbon footprint. So those companies who cannot switch to an alternative fleet fully, they can actually compensate for their carbon footprints retroactively. I think that this is an area that is worthwhile to be considered by each and every executive, so that they can also make their companies carbon neutral during the transitory period. I think that the energy transitory period is something that another question can be devoted to. I think this is the root of the problem, because if we can consider that it requires a huge investment to develop and then starting to use new technologies, and also it is quite costly initially, and if also we consider that we don't yet have many enough filling stations and other supply networks. Therefore, I think we still have a couple of questions to ask here during this discussion. If we look at the cars, for instance, then all of us can see that, well, in the past 20 years, if we look at mobility in this little country, Hungary, so how much change has taken place, and what is the per capita or per family number of cars. And as we could hear in the previous panel discussion, we can expect a dynamic increase in the demand for mobility. It's a question how to satisfy that increasing demand. Well, these two, how can you align? Well, on one hand, our customers are quite educated. They have quite high demands, and they are quite informed already when coming to order a new car. And of course, the supply side also wants to increase our range of offers towards the electric cars. So actually, a lot of other car companies have entered new electric cars on the market, but also it means that electric cars actually are not only in premium brands, but BMW, for instance, they can sell premium cars even in the electric range at the same price. So actually, the E3 BMW is one of the most popular brands, so it means that our customers are open to these electric cars, and then the new models that we have entered on the market, we can already see a huge order book. A lot of customers have already ordered these new cars as well. Sustainability is a very important aspect at the company, BMW, and then we want to use a high proportion of recycled materials as part of our raw materials, and BMW X is the biggest lifestyle car. Well, it includes 60 kilograms of recycled plastic, and then customers actually like that idea. So this kind of awareness is clearly seen on the part of our customers. And in Hungary, we can say that the next milestone that will come in electric cars and the manufacturing change is connected to Hungary, because in year 2025 in Debrecen, Eastern Hungary, a brand new factory will be opened, the late green digital, so effective digital and green. So this is a BMW group will start this new factory there in Debrecen as the first such plant across the world. So that's a very exciting period ahead of us. Well, it's quite exciting. So how then your company can at BICA support these new targets? So that's quite a challenge that András mentioned, that is how to satisfy this demand for market infrastructure that is received from the market. Well, even now, today in Hungary, we have quite many high capacity filling stations, though not so many, but actually in the pre-financing, using pre-financing funds from the European Union, we will be able to implement and to install 25 more filling stations across Hungary. And I hope that by this, in doing so, we can serve most of the major nodes across Hungary in its road network. So actually in Hungary, therefore, a roaming service can be offered. And then at more than 1,200 filling stations, you can use your Shell cards to refuel your car. And this is an innovative solution that can help us serve customers who already have some electric cars and hybrid cars in their respective fleets. And then, of course, this card will be available for owners of cars as well, personal vehicles. So I think that Shell actually takes a lot of steps, is taking a lot of steps in order to be pioneering in relation to achieving this target. And other objective for us is for year 2025 to achieve that we have a high number of filling stations in Hungary that can help us compete with our competitors not only through roaming services but through our own network as well.
This sounds very ambitious. Previously I said that we can count on how many cars we have per families and how many we used to have, but maybe you have a lesser of an image of transport traffic, road transport. 70% is being implemented on public roads, and that's not because it's the cheapest or the least environmentally unfriendly. It's actually almost the most harming to the environment. But the reason is because it's the most flexible way of transport. So public road transport is being used because it plays a super huge role in allowing us to get products from the shelves in an easy manner. David, could you say something promising? At the beginning, we had the feeling that there's no light at the end of the tunnel. But what could you recommend? I think there's a bit of a light at the end of the tunnel. As you've mentioned, one of the greatest challenges is that customers expect a huge level of flexibility, and economic players also expect this flexibility. We all like ordering something today, for example, a laptop, and by tomorrow having it on my table. And this is the same thing with economic players. If they need semi-finished products or any components, they want to order it today by 2 o'clock, and they want to have it by tomorrow in their production. And for that we need a lot of trucks, and this flexibility can only be provided by public roads. As a Hungarian song says, the train does not wait. Yes, the train cannot provide the flexibility that is expected from the market. So obviously public road freight traffic will remain with us for a long time. And then I'd also like to say a few words on possible green solutions, or what the latest technologies are. We've talked about electric solutions. So here you would have a 650 kilowatt per hour battery. So just for you to have an idea, last month we used 400 kilowatts per hour as a family of 4, and so this truck would have a battery of 650 kilowatt per hour, and it could make a journey of 400 kilometers. And obviously having a chauffeur with a set amount of time at disposal to drive, we have to make the longest distance. So what we see is that with electric trucks we cannot really transport things efficiently for long distances. So 50% of the driver's time would have to be spent with charging. So that's the trade-off. So I think I'll tell you what I believe in, and that is a hydrogen driven car, simply because it can be green. In Switzerland today they already use hydrogen driven trucks. Hydrogen can be stored easily, it can be filled easily, it's very green. It can be very green. Actually, today we have already trucks that, if filled with 32 kilograms of hydrogen, they can make a distance of 400 kilometers. The problem, on the other hand, is that it's very expensive. It's 5 times more expensive than a diesel truck. And the other challenge, just not to use the word problem. So the other challenge is that today our take is that the market is not yet willing to pay for these huge expenses. So freight companies are really fighting really hard about just price changes of a few cents. It's very hard to come up at a tender with, for example, a hydrogen-driven truck, because that would be a 4 to 5 times higher cost for the transport company, which they wouldn't be able to pass on to the customers. So I think there is a need for a shift of mindsets, which is already present in a passenger car segment. There's obviously a higher level of attention or awareness towards environmental friendliness or sustainability, but for the moment, for the time being, we don't really see the willingness on behalf of the business community to pay for the additional costs. Tamás, are you thinking about supporting freight companies with LNG or hydrogen? Yes, sorry, I didn't mention LNG as a potential solution. Actually, the experiences are very good. We don't actually use LNG trucks, but we do have information from other market actors. It costs approximately twice as much as a traditional truck, but I think this is what is closest to a traditional diesel truck. Yes, it's good that you mentioned the twofold price, which is still very, very high compared to a normal diesel truck. But I think this is already a more foreseeable perspective in terms of returns and profitability. I think where we could make steps forward is for regulators, for example. So LNG trucks in Germany receive significant toll reductions. I think this could also work for other segments, and I think the regulators could really support the spread of these solutions. And then the other issue is also the filling station. So last year Shell bought the first LNG terminal in Sziget-Szent Miklós on motorway M0. It's going to be open at the end of this year under the Shell logo, but there is further expansion to be expected in the field of LNG, especially on the transit routes where most of the freight traffic takes place. And I think it's important that the various sectors of the industry cooperate in establishing the most important charging points, for example. And then there's another aspect that is important to mention is bio-LNG, which is manufactured from plant-based or animal-based waste or residuals. So actually there's an additional bonus in the gas that would normally cause greenhouse gases being reused. So currently, obviously, the war has increased the price of gas, and therefore it has also pushed the LNG prices upwards. But the bio-LNG could still be more efficient and even a greener source of fuel for trucks. And one more thing to be mentioned here. There's always a negative tone to diesel vehicles, and I think this is also something to focus on, because there's not always a possibility to have an electric truck or to have an LNG filling station. But then there are hydrogen plant-based oils, which is also interesting, because it also uses waste from agriculture, and Shell opened a small business in Finland. And it's very interesting because this has approximately a 90% lower carbon footprint than a normal fossil fuel. Which is even more interesting, however, it's that it's not only the carbon footprint that is lower, but it also burns in a cleaner manner. And it can actually be filled into Euro 6 traditional engines, so there's no need for special trucks to place on the roads. But again, the spread of this source of energy or this fuel is difficult because there's not sufficient supply, but we would like to see it spread across Europe. Well, as far as I can see, there are a lot of good initiatives, but in the field of freight transport, the solution seems to be quite far. My father, in 1985, was already very worried about greenhouse gas emissions. This is why he decided to use liquid natural gas, LNG, in our old Lada 1200. So he modified the car himself, and this is I'm giving you this example because in 1985. The mechanic in the next village was able to install this Italian-made gadget that helped my father use the Lada in a more environmentally friendly manner. And it's incredible to see that this existing technology has not spread in such a long time. So I think on a decision-making level, there are quite a lot of things to do. And yes, this could be perhaps a closing remark. And if I want to summarize what we've discussed in this panel discussion, mobility and public road transport can do a lot to reduce greenhouse gases. As far as I've understood, we are doing quite well in terms of passenger cars. There are really real solutions in the pipeline, and we consumers are already willing to pay the price for this, so we're willing to pay more expensive cars, more expensive maintenance. On the other hand, in the field of freight traffic, we're not doing so well. So first of all, we need technological development, but we also need responsible leaders and executives who no longer just think about recycling, but also about, for example, logistics companies who would ask double the price because of environmentally friendly solutions. And this is actually the price of this energy transition, and there's nothing to do about it. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you have logistics activities, please recall this discussion when you make your decisions. Thank you for your attention, and I wish you a pleasant afternoon. Thank you.